Hi, my name is Charlotte and this channel is about my attempt to become moderately competent at drawing. This week I'm going to be talking about how I've spent the time I allotted over the last month to improving my general drawing skills, expanding my visual library, and new this month to learning to paint. So if you watched my last video on this topic, which was about learning to draw birds, I said at the time that I felt I had over-planned my time. It was too rigid a schedule and it became kind of uncomfortable and stifling. So at the time I said, well, I think what I'll do is I'll be much less planned. I won't pick a focus ahead of time. I won't try and structure my time too much. And unfortunately, that didn't really turn out to work for me either. I think I need to find some happy medium between the two extremes that I've tried out so far. So it's not that I didn't draw at all this month, but whereas with the bird month, I found myself moving through a series of increasingly complex tasks, and I therefore felt like I had made some progress and I had something to show for my time. This month, a lot of my time was spent on kind of raw mileage. If you've watched my video about my beginner sketchbooks, I talk there about my junk sketchbook. And the goal with that sketchbook was always to give me a space to practice simple drawing skills. So a lot of my time that I spent drawing this month was spent doing that type of thing. I'm not going to show you every page because that would be very boring, but typical examples of things that I worked on were playing with complex cylinders and also things like simple faces, tiny little scenes in perspective, that kind of thing. So it's all mileage, and some of it might even be useful mileage, but it's not particularly high quality, and it doesn't have that kind of direction and focus to it that I was really hoping for. So next month, I'm going to try to be a bit more organized in this time, try to strike that happy balance between too much planning and not enough. I would like to spend some time improving my grasp of how to draw plants and flowers, both as the main element of a drawing and as a background element in landscapes. And that, for once, actually fits in more closely with some of the other things that I'm trying to learn elsewhere in my art practice. So that's drawing, very short and sweet this month because I don't have a lot to show for myself. So the other thing that I did was restart learning to paint. A brief history of my attempts to learn to paint would be some painting classes back at school 30 years ago that I don't remember at all. When I started learning to draw, I picked up some watercolors, really just in order to add color to pen and ink drawings. Since then, I tried some simple classes on Skillshare, which were intended to teach things like brush control and paint consistency. This is all with watercolor, but it never really grabbed me in a huge way. I like watercolor. I would one day like to become proficient with it, but it didn't really spark a huge amount of enthusiasm in me at that time. And then I have to be honest, I had never heard of gouache at that point, and I sort of tried it for the first time in the middle of 2022, so sort of June, July, August 2022, I had a go with it. I did not get very far. I was using a book called Getting Started with Gouache by Emma Block, which has lots of little projects on it, and most of my initial pages of gouache are either very simple exercises, things like learning paint consistency, learning how to blend, or they were these little step-by-step tutorials. So I did a few of those, but as always with me, I have very finite patience for step-by-step tutorials. It's not my preferred way to learn at all. So I abandoned it after a few months and didn't really think about it that much. More recently though, and particularly while I was drawing birds, I kept thinking how great it would be to be able to paint them. And I also rediscovered a type of art that I love, which is these kind of 1930s to 50s travel posters. And it suddenly occurred to me that actually these were almost certainly painted in gouache originally. Realizing that that could be a type of art that I could make was really kind of exciting. So this month, in terms of what I actually did, I revisited the absolute basics. So Ruth Wilshaw, who's a gouache teacher here on YouTube, she has her own website, she has a Domestika class. She has a little free course called Something Like Gouache Boot Camp. It covers things like paint consistency, brush control, blending, and layering, so the key skills with gouache. And from there I went on to both continuing to try to work on those simple skills that I'm going to need to have, but also doing these tiny little projects in a separate sketchbook. As you've seen in my drawing practice, I can get stuck in doing a lot of really, really basic mileage at the expense of ever doing anything more finished looking. So I decided that from the outset, I would try to do little tiny paintings. Even though they're going to be terrible, I would just focus on doing these very, very small finished pieces. So I've done a few of those. I originally intended to do one every day, and I think as I develop more skills, that's going to become a more plausible thing to do. But for the moment, I don't really know enough to actually do one every day, so I've done a handful. All of these are from step-by-step tutorials, so this is not kind of my set of ideas. But again, hopefully, as I get more experience with this, I'll be able to do more of my own work and less of just copying other people. So that's my plan for the next few weeks. I'm going to be working on drawing plants. I'm going to be working on continuing to learn the basics of gouache painting, and I'm really looking forward to both of them. I'm really feeling enthusiastic about both of these topics. In the meantime, next week I'm going to be back to talk about figure drawing, where I've mostly been focusing on learning the muscle groups in the torso. So a lot of simple anatomy type of work over the last few weeks, and I'll tell you more about that next weekend. In the meantime, I hope you have a great creative week, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye for now.